Hello, and welcome to the virtual service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lake Norman. Our fellowship walks diverse paths to find meaning and purpose, but are united in our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all, and the obligation to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. All are welcome, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, or economic status. My name is Lynn Henderson, and I'm a charter member of the fellowship and currently serve on the board. We will begin this morning by lighting our chalice. We light this chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In our search for truth, may we be just. In our search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Laurie Walker. Laurie is a charter member of our congregation, and this morning she will share a reflection titled, Let It Rain, which is inspired by the words of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who wrote, "For after all, the best thing one can do when it's raining is let it rain." As the pandemic continues, Laurie will explore the nature of acceptance and practices that enhance equanimity. Laurie Walker.
Henry Wadsworth Longfellow writes, "For the best thing that we can do when it's raining, after all, is let it rain." When I read that quote, it seemed to just sum up so many of my feelings that I have about this pandemic, and it became the title for our reflection today. This week, I read a book called Intimations by Zadie Smith, and she wrote this book and published it during the lockdown. It includes 6 personal essays, her take on the lockdown, her own experience. But there was a funny part of this book that I want to begin with, where she describes a meme that she saw recently on the internet. And it features, maybe you've seen it, Mel Gibson, the co-director, co-writer, producer of The Passion of Christ, and the character that plays Jesus in The Passion of Christ. And they're sitting side by side. Jesus is soaked in blood. He's got his crown of thorns on, and he's listening patiently to Mel Gibson, who's leaning over and doing what looks like maybe a little bit of complaining. And the meme caption says, "Explaining to my friends with kids under 6 what it's like to be isolating alone." So, there's no doubt that each of us have had a unique experience during COVID, during lockdown. Some of us are alone. Some of us are in a house full of people. And wherever we are, this started in March, and it's August. It's still raining. This pandemic that many thought would pass in a few weeks has lasted and is going to continue into our foreseeable future. It's become our new reality. We are forced to respond to living while it's still raining. We can rail against it, we could scream, we could shout, we could wish life gets back to normal, or whatever that means, or we could find an umbrella. As author Maria Popova puts it, when some cataclysm in the slipstream capsizes the raft, shatters it, leaves us gasping amidst the flotsam, ejected from the familiar flow of time, do we sink or do we swim? Today, our reflection explores responses from the UU faith, from psychology, from literature, from Buddhism, and even Stoicism. One of the most helpful articles that I read when I Googled pandemic and acceptance was an article that examined Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of the journey of loss, the emotional journey of loss. So after our dizzy descent into denial, when the pandemic started, anger, bargaining, sadness, we end up finding ourselves, as time passes, struggling with this stage of acceptance, accepting our situation, the rain that keeps on raining. And acceptance involves living the questions, which we talk about a lot in our UU Faith. As the author of the article I read wrote, and his name is Andrew Penn, how do we begin to imagine accepting sickness, disruption, death, or even more, finding meaning in it? For some, losses have been profound. Death of loved ones, crippling loneliness, loss of income, businesses, and more. For others, the changes have been disruptive and people have had to adapt, working from home, schooling their own children, or sometimes doing both, working from home and trying to school their own children. The lives of everyone around the globe have been disrupted. It's mind-boggling, and it's also thought-provoking. This disruption has knocked us out of our daily stupor of living. We have had to rethink, reconsider, we've had to go inward. Everything about our living has come into sharp relief. Author Rebecca Solnit recently wrote about this time. We are both becalmed and in a state of profound change. There will be a time when it stops raining. Now is the time to consider what is important to you, what really matters. Knowing that we are all vulnerable, that we are all connected, how can we better ensure the well-being for all people? How do we continue to remember that when one member of our village gets sick, we all suffer? How can we be better? As Mary Oliver asks in her poem, "Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" As we reflect on these questions, our UU principle comes to light. The third UU principle, acceptance of one another and encouragement for spiritual growth, is the one of our principles that deals with acceptance. The Reverend Rob Hardy's of All Souls Church in Washington, D.C., writes about spiritual growth that comes with radical acceptance. He writes, "Spiritual growth isn't about vertical ascent to heaven, but about growth in every dimension at once. It's spirituality in 3D. Growth in spirit doesn't measure one's proximity to a God above, but rather to the spaciousness of one's soul, its volume, its capacity, its size." In her sermon, Be Not Afraid, UU minister Susan Mangan speaks about spiritually awakening. She recites a poem by Rilke. "I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I will give myself to it. I circle around God, around the primordial tower I've been circling for thousands of years, and still I don't know, am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song?" Reverend Mangan writes, "This time can be a force of awakening. Living a religious life means continuing to turn to that small, still voice. Joanna Macy, activist and Buddhist scholar, is the author of the recent translation of Rilke's Book of Hours, Love Poems to God. Macy writes about living through trauma and acceptance. I'm not insisting that we be brimming with hope. It's okay not to be optimistic. Buddhist teachings say feeling that you have to maintain hope can wear you out. So just be present. The biggest gift you can give is to be absolutely present. And when you're worrying about whether you're hopeful or hopeless or pessimistic or optimistic, who cares? The main thing is that you're showing up, that you're here, and that you're finding ever more capacity to love this world, because it will not be healed without that. This was what is going to unleash our intelligence and our ingenuity and our solidarity for the healing of the world. In Macy's interview with Krista Tippett in her program On Being, she reads a sonnet by Rilke, which has helped her in dealing with crisis. It's called Sonnet to Orpheus. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself into wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am. Macy emphasizes, let your presence ring out like a bell in the night. If drinking is bitter, change yourself to wine. And if the earthly no longer knows your name, whisper to the silent earth, I'm flowing. Buddhist leaders offer teachings that can help people in current times of fear, anxiety, and isolation. One key component of Buddhism is cultivating compassion. Buddhist teachings emphasize 4 immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Buddhist teachers believe these 4 attitudes can replace anxious and fearful states of mind. When emotions like fear or anxiety become too strong, Buddhist teachers say one should recall examples of compassion, of kindness, and of empathy. As we continue to social distance, our Buddhist teachers advise us that this is a time to take care of one another. Author Zadie Smith's book, the one with the meme of Christ and Mel Gibson, offers words profoundly intimate, tender, and often humorous. Smith explores ideas, feelings, and questions prompted by an unprecedented situation. Writing is her umbrella. From her book, she writes, we can't all sit cross-legged like Buddhas day and night, meditating on ultimate matters, or I can't, but I also don't want to just do time anymore. Not the way I used to, and yet in my case, I can't let it go. Old habits die hard. I can't rid myself of the need to do something, to make something, to feel that this new expanse of time hasn't been wasted. Still, it's nice to have company that now seems to be consuming everybody. People want to make or grow or do something. I do feel comforted to discover that I'm not the only person on earth who has no idea what life is for, nor what it is to be done with all this time aside from filling it. In 1947, Albert Camus wrote a book called La Peste, or The Plague. Even with its depressing subject about a plague in the 1940s, he really doesn't tell an exact year. One critic of this book called it a sermon of hope. The day the plague is declared over, people dance in town squares, rubbing shoulders with strangers. Class distinctions crumble, as they ultimately did not during the pandemic. The city's residents knew now that if there is one thing they can always yearn for and sometime attain, it is human love. The first A in the book Intimations deals with Stoicism. Author Zadie Smith's first response to the lockdown was to explore the wisdom of Stoicism concerning change. Here's a few Stoic concepts. Work with what you can change. We can't change the fact that COVID-19 exists, but we could change how we respond to it. We can stay home. We can wear masks when we go out. We can practice social distancing and remind ourselves that these personal inconveniences are there to protect everyone. It is an opportunity to grow our sense of service to community. Another Stoic concept is to take the expanded view. The Stoics notice that we make our hardships worse when we imagine that they are exceptional. Other individuals are facing hardships, some harder than ours. Another Stoic concept is to choose a model. Of course, the frontline workers come to mind, but focusing on someone we admire who's really putting themselves on the line for the service of good. And finally, enjoy what is still in your power. We can still love, we can still laugh and sing and listen to music and have great conversations and more. Finally, I share my own mindfulness practice to start each day where I am, wherever I am on the path. Some days feeling more suffering than others, some days feeling more loneliness than others, but every day to begin again, to breathe in peace, to breathe out love, and to look around and see what life has to offer. I'm going to end with a poem that I love and have read before in our fellowship. It's called Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda. Now we count to 12, and we all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment without engines. We would all be together in sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the men gathering salt would not look at hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it's about. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Now I'll count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. So friends, may we live into these questions. May we find some answers. And I'll close with an Irish blessing. May the long-time sun shine upon you, all love surrounds you, and the pure, pure light that's within you guide your way on. Till we meet again.
Thank you, Laurie, for that inspiring message. And now please enjoy a musical interlude from Mike Alicki.
Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. This is an Eric Clapton song called, of all things, Let It Rain. The rain is falling through the mist of sorrow that surrounds me. The sun could never thaw away the bliss that lays around me. Let it rain, let it rain, let your love rain down on me. Let it rain, let it rain, let it rain, rain, rain. Her life was like a desert flower burning in the sun, until I found a way to love. It's harder said than done. Let it rain, let it rain, let your love rain down on me. Let it rain, let it rain, let it rain, rain, rain. Now I know the secret, there is nothing that I lack. If I give my love to you, you surely give it back. Let it rain, let it rain, let your love rain down on me. Let it rain, let it rain, let it rain, rain, rain. All right, take care, y'all.
If you're a visitor, welcome. We're glad you found us. If you would like more information about our congregation or to stay in touch with us, please contact our membership chair, Linda, whose email will appear at the bottom of your screen. And if you're a member, please continue to send your pledges and contributions to our mailing address, which is found in your newsletter and also on the bottom of your screen. Also, members, please keep reaching out to each other. Stay in touch whenever possible. Let's build our virtual bonds until our community can come again together in person. And now let us go forward and live our lives with integrity. Blessed be.